The young buck drifted through the debris field like a ghost searching for treasure. Captain Hana sat in her command chair, eyes fixed on the scanner display. Her gray hair was tied back in a practical bun, and her weathered hands moved across the controls with practiced ease. She had been running salvage operations in the outer fringe for 15 years, and she knew how to spot valuable wreckage from worthless scrap. "Captain, I am picking up something unusual," Day called from his station. The young engineer leaned forward, his dark eyes narrowing as he studied the readings. "There is a large piece of wreckage about 2 kilometers ahead. The power signature suggests it was military grade." Minho grunted from the security station. The stocky man with the scarred jaw crossed his arms. "Military means trouble. We should move on." "Military also means valuable salvage," Hana replied. She made her decision quickly, as she always did. "Day, take us closer. Minho, get ready in case we have company. Sora, prep the medbay just in case." The ship moved forward through the floating debris. Pieces of metal and plastic drifted past the viewports like leaves in a dark river. As they approached, the wreckage took shape. It was the remains of a transport vessel, split nearly in half. The hull plates were bent and scorched, showing signs of weapons fire. "Those are Thraxian markings," Day said quietly. His voice carried a note of concern. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Thraxians. They were warriors, predators who stood over 8 feet tall with claws that could tear through steel. Their empire controlled dozens of systems, and their military was feared everywhere. "Even better," Hana said, though her expression was cautious. "Thraxian ships carry high-quality components. Day, suit up. You are going over there." 20 minutes later, Day floated through the broken corridor of the Thraxian ship. His suit lights cut through the darkness, revealing walls covered with strange symbols and claw marks. Everything was built on a larger scale than human ships, reminding him that this vessel had been made for beings much bigger than himself. The transport had been carrying cargo, but most of it was destroyed or scattered into space. Day moved carefully, checking each section for anything salvageable. He was about to give up when he heard a sound. It was faint, almost like a whimper. "Captain, I'm hearing something," he said into his radio. "It sounds like—" "I think something is alive in here." "Be careful," Hana warned. "Injured Thraxians are dangerous." Day followed the sound to a sealed compartment. The door was jammed, but he managed to pry it open with his tools. Inside, huddled in the corner, was a small figure. At first, Day thought it was some kind of animal. Then he realized what he was looking at. It was a Thraxian, but tiny. A child. The cub was maybe 3 feet tall, covered in gray-green scales with darker stripes along its back. Its eyes were large and golden, filled with terror. Blood matted the fur around its shoulder. When it saw Day, it pressed itself harder against the wall and hissed, showing small but sharp teeth. "Captain, you need to hear this," Day said slowly. "There is a survivor. It is a child." "A Thraxian child." There was a long pause. Then Hana's voice came back, tight with tension. "How badly injured?" "I can see blood. It looks scared." "Captain, we cannot just leave it here." "No, we cannot," Hana agreed, though she did not sound happy about it. "Bring it back. But be careful. Even young Thraxians have claws." Day moved slowly, keeping his hands visible. He spoke in a soft voice, though he knew the cub probably did not understand human language. The important thing was the tone, calm and gentle. He had read somewhere that most species could understand emotions in voice patterns. "It is okay," he said. "I am not going to hurt you. You are safe now." The cub watched him with those large golden eyes. Its hissing quieted but did not stop. Day reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a ration bar. He broke off a piece and held it out. The cub sniffed the air, then looked at the food, then back at Day. Slowly, very slowly, the small creature reached forward and snatched the food. It ate quickly, watching Day the entire time. When the piece was gone, Day offered another. This time the cub took it without pulling back as far. "Good," Day said softly. "See? I am a friend." Getting the cub back to the young buck took patience. Day had to move slowly, always keeping himself between the cub and any sudden movements. When they finally reached the airlock, Sora was waiting with a medical kit and a worried expression. The cub shrank back when it saw another human. Day knelt down, placing himself at the cub's eye level. Without thinking about it, he reached out and let the cub sniff his hand. After a moment, the small creature pressed its head against his palm, seeking comfort. "Well," Sora said quietly, "that is interesting." They brought the cub to the medical bay. Sora worked quickly. treating the wound on the shoulder while Day held the young Thraxian steady. The cub whimpered but did not try to bite or scratch. Its claws dug into Day's jacket, but more from fear than aggression. "The wound is not serious," Sora said as she applied bandages, "but this little one is severely dehydrated and malnourished. It has been alone for at least several days." Hana stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Her face showed the internal debate she was having. Finally, she sighed. "Galactic law is clear," she said. "We need to take it to the nearest Thraxian station. They will know what to do with an orphan." "That is 3 days' travel," Day said. He looked down at the cub, which had finally stopped shaking. "Can we at least make sure it is stable first?" "Of course," Hana replied. "We are not monsters." But Day do not get attached. This is not a pet. It is a Thraxian. Over the next 2 days, something unexpected happened. The cub, which they learned was named Rel from markings on its clothing, refused to leave Day's side. When Day went to the engine room to work, Rel followed. When Day ate in the mess hall, Rel sat beside him. When Day tried to sleep in his quarters, Rel curled up at the foot of his bunk. "This is not normal behavior," Sora said on the second day. She had been researching Thraxian biology in the ship's database. Thraxian cubs are naturally aggressive and independent. They only show this kind of attachment to their parents or pack leaders. "I am not its parent," Day said. He was sitting on the floor of the engine room, showing Rel how to use a basic tool. The cub watched with intense concentration, its small claws gripping a wrench that was too big for its hands. "I just found it." "Tell that to Rel," Sora replied with a slight smile. "Look at how it watches you. That is imprinting behavior. In the wild, Thraxian cubs bond with whoever protects and feeds them in the first days after trauma. It thinks you are its guardian." Day looked down at Rel. The cub looked back up at him, golden eyes bright with trust. Something in Day's chest tightened. He had not asked for this. He was just a salvage ship engineer, not a parent to an alien child. But when Rel reached up and gripped his sleeve, making a soft chirping sound, Day found himself smiling. "What happens when we reach the station?" he asked quietly. "The Thraxians will take custody," Sora said. "They have facilities for orphans. Rel will be raised by their people, taught their ways." "That is good," Day said, trying to convince himself. "Rel should be with its own kind." But as the Gyeongbok approached Thraxian Station Karash, Day found himself dreading their arrival. Rel had started to mimic his movements, copying the way he walked and worked. The cub had learned to understand simple commands in human language and would respond with happy chirps when Dai praised it. Minho, who had been avoiding the cub for the entire journey, finally spoke up the night before they docked. "The kid likes you," he said gruffly. He was cleaning his weapon at the table while Day fed Rel pieces of cooked meat. "I have never seen a Thraxian act like that around a human." "Is that bad?" Day asked. Minho shrugged. "I don't know. But the Thraxians are proud. They might not like that one of their cubs bonded with a human. Could be complicated." That night, Day lay awake in his bunk with Rel sleeping beside him. The cub's small body rose and fell with each breath, peaceful and trusting. Day realized with sudden clarity that he did not want to give Rel up. The feeling surprised him with its intensity. In just a few days, this small creature had become important to him in a way he could not quite explain. When the Gyeongbok docked at Karash the next morning, Hana called everyone to the airlock. Through the viewport, they could see the massive station, all sharp angles and dark metal. Thraxian ships moved around it like predators circling prey. "Remember," Hana said, looking at each of them, "we are here to turn over the cub and collect our salvage fee. Nothing more. This is standard procedure." But when the airlock opened and the Thraxian delegation entered, Day knew immediately that nothing about this situation was going to be standard. The Thraxians were huge, towering over the humans by several feet. Their scales gleamed under the ship's lights, and their eyes held an intelligence that was both alien and unsettling. The leader stepped forward, a scarred warrior with dark stripes and cold yellow eyes. Behind him stood a female Thraxian draped in ceremonial robes, her presence commanding respect. "I am Commander Vex," the male said in heavily accented human language. "You have rescued one of our young. We are grateful. Where is the cub?" Hana gestured toward the medical bay. Day brought Rel forward, his hand resting protectively on the small head. The cub looked up at the massive Thraxians and made a sound, not a greeting, but something closer to uncertainty. Then Rel did something that made everyone in the airlock freeze. Instead of running to its own people, The cub pressed itself against Day's legs, small claws gripping his pants. It looked up at him with wide eyes, seeking reassurance. The female Thraxian's eyes widened. She stared at the scene before her, and for a long moment no one spoke. When she finally did, her voice was filled with something that might have been shock. "Impossible," she whispered. The female Thraxian in the ceremonial robe stepped forward. Her movements were graceful despite her size, each step deliberate and measured. Her scales were lighter than Vex's, almost silver in the harsh station lights. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that made everyone stand a little straighter. "I am Thera, Mother Guardian of the Thraxian Empire. I oversee all matters concerning our young." She looked down at Rel, still pressed against Day's legs. Her golden eyes narrowed slightly. "This behavior is highly unusual." "The cub was traumatized," Hana said quickly. She could feel the tension building in the airlock. "We found it alone on the wreckage. My engineer provided medical care and basic comfort. That is all." "That is all?" Vex's voice was cold. He took a step forward, and Rel made a small sound of fear. The cub's claws dug deeper into Day's pants. "You dare suggest that a Thraxian cub would show submission to a human over its own kind for simple medical care?" Thera raised one clawed hand, silencing Vex. She crouched down, bringing her massive frame closer to Rel's level. The movement was careful, non-threatening. She made a series of clicking sounds, speaking in the Thraxian language. Rel's ears twitched, showing the cub understood. But Rel did not move from behind Day. "Little one," Thera said, switching back to human language. "These humans rescued you. That is good. But now you must come with us. We are your people. We will take care of you." Rel looked up at Day. The cub's golden eyes were wide and uncertain. Day felt his heart sink. He knew this moment was coming, but that did not make it easier. He knelt down, putting himself at Rel's eye level. "It is okay," he said softly. "These are your people. They will take good care of you." But when Thera reached out to take Rel's hand, the cub pulled back and wrapped both arms around Day's neck. The small body pressed tight against him, trembling. Rel made sounds that were clearly distress calls, high-pitched and urgent. The change in the Thraxians was immediate. Vex's hand went to the weapon at his belt. The other warriors in the delegation shifted their stance, suddenly more aggressive. Thera stood up slowly, her expression unreadable. "This is imprinting," she said quietly. "Complete parental bond formation. I have seen it only in cubs with their birth mothers or adopted pack leaders." She looked at Day with something that might have been confusion or concern. "What did you do to this cub?" "Nothing," Day said honestly. His arms had automatically wrapped around Rel, holding the frightened cub close. "I fed Rel, kept the cub safe. That is all." "You are human," Vex said, his voice sharp with barely controlled anger. "You have no claws, no armor, no strength worth mentioning. You are prey, not predator. For a Thraxian cub to bond with you defies every law of nature." "Commander," Thera said, her tone carrying a warning. She looked at the human crew, her eyes moving from face to face. "Humans, I must speak plainly. In our culture, the bond between parent and cub is sacred. It is formed through strength, through the demonstration of power and protection. Cubs bond with those who can keep them alive, who can teach them to survive and hunt." She gestured at Day. "By every measure we understand, this should be impossible. And yet here stands a Thraxian cub who has chosen a human as its guardian. This is not simply unusual. This challenges everything we know about our own biology." "So what happens now?" Hana asked. She had positioned herself slightly in front of her crew, ready to defend them if needed. Thera was quiet for a long moment. Her clawed hand tapped against her ceremonial robes as she thought. Finally she spoke. "There is an old law, one that has not been invoked in several generations. When a cub shows clear parental bonding with a guardian who is not Thraxian, the guardian may undergo the trial of kinship. 3 tests to prove they are worthy to raise one of our young." "No," Vex said immediately. "That law was written for allied species who share similar strength. Not for humans. The law does not specify species," Thera replied calmly, "only that the guardian must prove worthiness." She looked at Day again. "However, I must warn you. The trials are designed for Thraxian capabilities. They test hunting skill, protective instinct, and the strength of the bond itself. Many Thraxians fail these trials. A human has never attempted them." "Day," Hana said quietly, "you don't have to do this. We can find another way." But Day was looking down at Rel, still clinging to him and trembling. He thought about the past 3 days, teaching Rel to use tools, sharing meals, watching the small creature slowly learn to trust again after trauma. He thought about how Rel followed him everywhere, how the cub looked at him with complete faith. "I will do it," he said. "You will die," Vex said flatly. "The trials will kill you, and then the cub will be returned to proper Thraxian care anyway." "Maybe," Day replied. He looked up at the massive warrior, refusing to be intimidated. "But I have to try. Rel trusts me. I won't abandon that." Thera studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she gave a small nod of what might have been respect. "Very well. The trials will begin in 3 days. This will give you time to prepare, though I suspect no amount of preparation will be enough." She turned to her delegation. "The cub will remain with the human until the trials are complete. If he fails, Rel returns to our custody. If he succeeds," she paused. "If he succeeds, we will face a situation that has never occurred in our recorded history." After the Thraxians left, the crew gathered in the mess hall. Minho paced back and forth, agitated. Sora sat at the table with her medical scanner running diagnostic checks on Day. Hana stood by the viewport staring out at the station. "This is insane," Minho said. "You heard Vex, these trials are designed to kill you." "He said they were designed for Thraxians," Day corrected. "That is different. How is that different?" Minho demanded. "Because Thraxians rely on strength and speed," Sora said quietly. She looked up from her scanner. "Humans rely on intelligence and adaptability. The trials might not be impossible for Day, just very, very difficult." Hana turned from the viewport. Her expression was troubled. "I have been running salvage in this sector for 15 years. I have dealt with Thraxians before. They respect strength above all else. If you go into these trials trying to match them physically, you will lose. You need to think like a human, not like a Thraxian warrior." "What does that mean?" Day asked. "It means use your head," Minho said, finally stopping his pacing. His expression was grim but determined. "Thraxians fight head-on because they can afford to. Humans survive by being clever, by using tools and tactics. If these trials have any flexibility at all, exploit it." "I will help you prepare," Sora said. "I can access Thraxian medical databases, learn more about their biology and behavior. Maybe we can find patterns, weaknesses you can use. And I will teach you some dirty fighting tricks," Minho added. "Not for winning, but for surviving. Sometimes that is enough." Day looked at his crew, feeling a wave of gratitude. He had not expected their support, especially after he had volunteered for what was essentially a suicide mission. But here they were already planning how to help him. "Thank you," he said quietly. Hana walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. "Day, I need to ask you something seriously." "Why are you doing this? Rel is not your responsibility. You could walk away right now, and no one would blame you." Day looked over at the corner of the mess hall where Rel was curled up on a cushion, finally sleeping peacefully after the stress of the confrontation. The small chest rose and fell with each breath. Those tiny claws that had gripped him so desperately were now relaxed in sleep. "Because when I found Rel, that cub was alone and terrified in the dark. And when I offered food and safety, Rel trusted me. That trust means something." He turned back to Hana. "I know it sounds stupid. Rel is an alien. We have known each other for 3 days. But when that cub looks at me, I see someone who needs protection. Someone who chose me. I cannot just ignore that." Sora smiled slightly. "That is very human of you." "Maybe," Day replied. "Or maybe it is just being decent. I don't know. But I have to try." Over the next 3 days, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare D for the trials. Minho put him through combat training, teaching him how to dodge, how to use his smaller size as an advantage, how to endure pain and keep moving. Sora studied everything she could find about Thraxian psychology and behavior, looking for any edge they could exploit. Hana used her contacts on the station to gather information about the trials themselves. What she learned was not encouraging. The first trial involved hunting live prey in a hostile environment. The second required the candidate to defend the cub against trained warriors. The third was psychological, testing the bond itself. Through it all, Rel stayed close to Day. The cub seemed to sense that something important was happening. During training sessions, Rel would watch from the sidelines, golden eyes following every movement. At night, the small creature curled up next to Day, providing wordless comfort. On the morning of the trials, Day woke early. Rel was already awake, sitting up and watching him. In the past few days, the cub had grown more confident, more playful. But now those golden eyes showed worry. "Hey," Day said softly. He reached out and scratched behind Rel's ears, a gesture the cub had come to love. "It is going to be okay. I promise," Rel chirped softly and pressed against his hand. The cub had learned a few human words now, basic things like food and safe and day. Now the small voice tried to form sounds, coming out as day. "Stay." Day felt his throat tighten. "Yes, I am staying. I am not going anywhere." The trials were to be held in a special arena deep within the station. When the crew arrived, they found hundreds of Thraxians already gathered. Apparently, word of a human attempting the trial of kinship had spread quickly. Many had come to watch what they clearly expected to be a swift failure. Thera met them at the entrance. She looked at Day with an expression that was hard to read. "Last chance to withdraw," she said. Day looked down at Rel, holding his hand. Then he looked back at Thera. "I am ready." Thera nodded slowly. "Then let us begin. And, human, try not to die. It would complicate things tremendously." The first trial began in an artificial environment that had been designed to mimic a Thraxian hunting ground. Day stood at the entrance looking out at a landscape of rocky terrain, scattered vegetation, and what looked like cave systems. The ceiling far above was programmed to simulate natural light, making it feel like an actual planet surface. Thera's voice echoed through the arena from hidden speakers. "The first trial is the hunt. You must track and capture live prey to prove you can provide for a cub. You have 6 hours. The prey is a rocka beast, a creature native to our homeworld. It is fast, aggressive, and will attack if cornered. Thraxian hunters typically kill it with claw and fang. You may use whatever methods you choose." Day looked up at the observation deck where his crew watched alongside hundreds of Thraxians. He could see Rel pressed against the transparent barrier, small hands on the glass. The cub's mouth was moving, probably calling for him, though he could not hear it from here. He took a deep breath and stepped into the arena. The door sealed behind him with a heavy clang. The first hour was spent simply observing. Day moved quietly through the terrain, staying low and using whatever cover he could find. He had no claws or enhanced senses, so he had to rely on what humans did best: patience and pattern recognition. He found tracks quickly enough. The rocka beast had left claw marks in the soft dirt near a water source. Day studied them carefully, noting the depth and spacing. The creature was large, probably twice his weight. But the tracks showed something interesting. The beast followed a regular path between the water and what looked like a denning area. Day spent the next 2 hours gathering materials. He found strong vines growing near the rocks, pieces of sharp stone that could be shaped into basic tools, and flexible branches. His engineering training helped here. He understood leverage, tension, and mechanical advantage. By the 4th hour, he had constructed a simple trap. It was not elegant, but it did not need to be. He placed it along the beast's regular path, then used rocks to create a barrier that would funnel the creature exactly where he wanted it to go. The next part was risky. He needed to lure the rocka beast to the trap. Day found the den and started making noise, throwing rocks and shouting. After a few minutes, he heard a roar from inside. The ground trembled as something large moved toward the entrance. The rocka beast emerged, and Day's first thought was that it looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard. It had thick scaled hide, powerful legs, and jaws full of teeth designed for crushing. Its eyes locked onto Day with unmistakable predatory intent. Day ran, not away from the trap but toward it, following the path he had planned. The beast charged after him, moving faster than he had expected. Its roar echoed off the rocks as it closed the distance. He vaulted over the rock barrier he had built, landing hard on the other side. The rocka beast followed without hesitation, exactly as he had hoped. It charged through the narrow gap he had created, and the trap activated. The snare he had built caught the beast's rear leg. The vine pulled tight, connected to a counterweight system made from heavy rocks. The creature roared in rage as it was yanked off balance. It struggled violently, but each pull only tightened the vine. Day kept his distance, watching carefully. The beast was captured but not injured, which was important. The trial required him to capture live prey, not kill it. After several minutes of struggling, the rocka beast exhausted itself and lay panting on the ground. A horn sounded across the arena. Thera's voice returned. "The first trial is complete. The human has succeeded through unconventional methods." When Day returned to the observation area, the reactions were mixed. Some Thraxians looked surprised. Others seemed angry, as if he had somehow cheated. Vex stood with his arms crossed, his expression dark, but Rel ran straight to him, chirping excitedly. The cub jumped into his arms, small claws gripping his shirt. Day held the young Thraxian close, feeling the rapid heartbeat against his chest. "You okay?" he whispered. Rel nodded against his shoulder. "Day brave," Thera approached them. She looked at the trap system still visible in the arena, then back at Day. "Interesting approach. You did not hunt the creature in the traditional sense. You engineered its capture." "I used the tools available to me," Day replied. "My tools are my mind and my hands, not claws." "The trial said nothing about how the prey must be captured," Thera said thoughtfully. "Only that it must be captured. You have passed. But the second trial will not be so easily solved with cleverness alone." The second trial took place in a combat arena. It was smaller, more confined. Day stood in the center while Rel was secured behind a protective barrier. The cub pressed against it, watching with worried eyes. "The second trial is protection," Thera announced. "You must defend Rel against 3 trained warriors for 10 minutes. You do not need to defeat them. You only need to prevent them from reaching the cub. If they touch Rel, you fail." 3 Thraxian warriors entered the arena. They were not as large as Vex, but they were still impressive. Their scales gleamed. Their movements showed years of combat training. They spread out surrounding Day, the horn sounded. The warriors attacked. Day had known from the start that he could not fight them directly. What Minho had taught him over the past 3 days was not about winning. It was about surviving, about enduring. The first warrior came in fast, claws extended. Day dropped low and rolled, using his smaller size to move under the attack. He came up between the warrior and the barrier where Rel waited, positioning himself as a human shield. The second warrior tried to flank him. Day spun, taking a hit to his shoulder rather than letting them get around him. Pain exploded through his arm, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. The third warrior saw an opening and lunged. Day threw himself backward, crashing into the barrier. His back hit hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. But he stayed between the warriors and Rel. Always between them and Rel. The warriors were not trying to seriously injure him, he realized. This was a test, not an execution. But they were not going easy on him either. Each strike was calculated to push him away from the barrier, to create an opening they could exploit. Day learned to read their movements. Thraxians were powerful, but they telegraphed their attacks slightly, muscles tensing before they struck. He used that, dodging at the last possible moment, using obstacles in the arena to slow them down. Time became meaningless. There was only the next attack, the next dodge, the next desperate scramble to maintain position. His body screamed in protest. Blood ran from cuts on his arms and face. His left leg gave out once and he hit the ground hard, but he got back up. He always got back up. Behind him he could hear Rel crying out. The cub was making distress sounds, upset by seeing Day hurt. That should have made it harder, but instead it gave him strength. Rel needed him to keep going. In the final minute, one warrior managed to grab his arm. The powerful grip pulled him away from the barrier, creating space. Another warrior darted toward the opening, toward Rel. Day did the only thing he could. He threw himself forward, using his own body weight as a weapon. He could not overpower the Thraxian holding him, but he could create momentum. They both fell, and Day used the fall to position himself in the path of the warrior going for Rel. The warrior's claws raked across his side. The pain was blinding, but Day wrapped his arms around the warrior's leg, holding on with desperate strength. Seconds ticked by. 5, 4, 3. The horn sounded. Time. The trial is complete. The warriors stepped back immediately. Day lay on the ground, gasping for breath. Every part of his body hurt. The arena was spinning. He heard someone running toward him, small feet against the floor. Day! Day! Rel's voice was panicked. Small hands touched his face, his arms checking for injuries with clumsy concern. Day forced his eyes open. He managed a weak smile. "Hey, I am okay." Rel made a sound between a sob and a chirp. The cub pressed close, trying to be careful of Day's injuries while also needing contact. Small claws gripped his shirt gently. Sora rushed into the arena with her medical kit. She started treating his wounds while muttering under her breath about stubborn engineers who should know better. But her hands were gentle and he could see relief in her eyes. Thera approached slowly. She looked down at the scene, the battered human, the worried cub, the emergency medical treatment. When she spoke, her voice carried across the suddenly silent arena. In all my years as Mother Guardian, I have watched countless warriors take this trial. Most pass through skill and strength. They dominate the challenge, overpower it. But what I just witnessed was different. She paused. This human did not try to win. He tried to endure. Every blow he took for the cub. Every time he fell, he positioned himself as a shield. This is not the Thraxian way. Vex stepped forward. Exactly. He showed weakness, not strength. The first trial began in an artificial environment that had been designed to mimic a Thraxian hunting ground. Day stood at the entrance, looking out at a landscape of rocky terrain, scattered vegetation, and what looked like cave systems. The ceiling far above was programmed to simulate natural light, making it feel like an actual planet surface. Thera's voice echoed through the arena from hidden speakers. The first trial is the hunt. You must track and capture live prey to prove you can provide for a cub. You have 6 hours. The prey is a Raka beast, a creature native to our homeworld. It is fast, aggressive, and will attack if cornered. Thraxian hunters typically kill it with claw and fang. You may use whatever methods you choose. Day looked up at the observation deck where his crew watched alongside hundreds of Thraxians. He could see Rel pressed against the transparent barrier, small hands on the glass. The cub's mouth was moving, probably calling for him, though he could not hear it from here. He took a deep breath and stepped into the arena. The door sealed behind him with a heavy clang. The first hour was spent simply observing. Day moved quietly through the terrain, staying low and using whatever cover he could find. He had no claws or enhanced senses, so he had to rely on what humans did best: patience and pattern recognition. He found tracks quickly enough. The Raka beast had left claw marks in the soft dirt near a water source. Day studied them carefully, noting the depth and spacing. The creature was large, probably twice his weight. But the tracks showed something interesting. The beast followed a regular path between the water and what looked like a denning area. Day spent the next 2 hours gathering materials. He found strong vines growing near the rocks, pieces of sharp stone that could be shaped into basic tools, and flexible branches. His engineering training helped here. He understood leverage, tension, and mechanical advantage. By the 4th hour, he had constructed a simple trap. It was not elegant, but it did not need to be. He placed it along the beast's regular path, then used rocks to create a barrier that would funnel the creature exactly where he wanted it to go. The next part was risky. He needed to lure the Raka beast to the trap. Day found the den and started making noise, throwing rocks and shouting. After a few minutes, he heard a roar from inside. The ground trembled as something large moved toward the entrance. The Raka beast emerged, and Day's first thought was that it looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard. It had thick scaled hide, powerful legs, and jaws full of teeth designed for crushing. Its eyes locked onto Day with unmistakable predatory intent. Day ran, not away from the trap but toward it, following the path he had planned. The beast charged after him, moving faster than he had expected. Its roar echoed off the rocks as it closed the distance. He vaulted over the rock barrier he had built, landing hard on the other side. The Raka beast followed without hesitation, exactly as he had hoped. It charged through the narrow gap he had created, and the trap activated. The snare he had built caught the beast's rear leg. The vine pulled tight, connected to a counterweight system made from heavy rocks. The creature roared in rage as it was yanked off balance. It struggled violently, but each pull only tightened the vine. Day kept his distance, watching carefully. The beast was captured but not injured, which was important. The trial required him to capture live prey, not kill it. After several minutes of struggling, the Raka beast exhausted itself and lay panting on the ground. A horn sounded across the arena. Thera's voice returned. The first trial is complete. The human has succeeded through unconventional methods. When Day returned to the observation area, the reactions were mixed. Some Thraxians looked surprised. Others seemed angry, as if he had somehow cheated. Vex stood with his arms crossed, his expression dark, but Rel ran straight to him, chirping excitedly. The cub jumped into his arms, small claws gripping his shirt. Day held the young Thraxian close, feeling the rapid heartbeat against his chest. "You okay?" he whispered. Rel nodded against his shoulder. "Day brave." Thera approached them. She looked at the trap system still visible in the arena, then back at Day. "Interesting approach. You did not hunt the creature in the traditional sense. You engineered its capture." "I used the tools available to me," Day replied. "My tools are my mind and my hands, not claws." The trial said nothing about how the prey must be captured, Thera said thoughtfully. Only that it must be captured. You have passed. But the second trial will not be so easily solved with cleverness alone. The second trial took place in a combat arena. It was smaller, more confined. Day stood in the center while Rel was secured behind a protective barrier. The cub pressed against it, watching with worried eyes. The second trial is protection, Thera announced. You must defend Rel against 3 trained warriors for 10 minutes. You do not need to defeat them. You only need to prevent them from reaching the cub. If they touch Rel, you fail. 3 Thraxian warriors entered the arena. They were not as large as Vex, but they were still impressive. Their scales gleamed. Their movements showed years of combat training. They spread out surrounding Day, the horn sounded. The warriors attacked. Day had known from the start that he could not fight them directly. What Minho had taught him over the past 3 days was not about winning. It was about surviving, about enduring. The first warrior came in fast, claws extended. Day dropped low and rolled, using his smaller size to move under the attack. He came up between the warrior and the barrier where Rel waited, positioning himself as a human shield. The second warrior tried to flank him. Day spun, taking a hit to his shoulder rather than letting them get around him. Pain exploded through his arm, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. The third warrior saw an opening and lunged. Day threw himself backward, crashing into the barrier. His back hit hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. But he stayed between the warriors and Rel. Always between them and Rel. The warriors were not trying to seriously injure him, he realized. This was a test, not an execution. But they were not going easy on him either. Each strike was calculated to push him away from the barrier, to create an opening they could exploit. Day learned to read their movements. Thraxians were powerful, but they telegraphed their attacks slightly, muscles tensing before they struck. He used that, dodging at the last possible moment, using obstacles in the arena to slow them down. Time became meaningless. There was only the next attack, the next dodge, the next desperate scramble to maintain position. His body screamed in protest. Blood ran from cuts on his arms and face. His left leg gave out once and he hit the ground hard, but he got back up. He always got back up. Behind him, he could hear Rel crying out. The cub was making distress sounds, upset by seeing Day hurt. That should have made it harder, but instead it gave him strength. Rel needed him to keep going. In the final minute, one warrior managed to grab his arm. The powerful grip pulled him away from the barrier, creating space. Another warrior darted toward the opening, toward Rel. Day did the only thing he could. He threw himself forward, using his own body weight as a weapon. He could not overpower the Thraxian holding him, but he could create momentum. They both fell, and Day used the fall to position himself in the path of the warrior going for Rel. The warrior's claws raked across his side. The pain was blinding, but Day wrapped his arms around the warrior's leg, holding on with desperate strength. Seconds ticked by. 5, 4, 3. The horn sounded. Time. The trial is complete. The warriors stepped back immediately. Day lay on the ground, gasping for breath. Every part of his body hurt. The arena was spinning. He heard someone running toward him, small feet against the floor. Day! Day! Rel's voice was panicked. Small hands touched his face, his arms checking for injuries with clumsy concern. Day forced his eyes open. He managed a weak smile. Hey, I am okay. Rel made a sound between a sob and a chirp. The cub pressed close, trying to be careful of Day's injuries while also needing contact. Small claws gripped his shirt gently. Sora rushed into the arena with her medical kit. She started treating his wounds while muttering under her breath about stubborn engineers who should know better. But her hands were gentle and he could see relief in her eyes. Thera approached slowly. She looked down at the scene, the battered human, the worried cub, the emergency medical treatment. When she spoke, her voice carried across the suddenly silent arena. In all my years as Mother Guardian, I have watched countless warriors take this trial. Most pass through skill and strength. They dominate the challenge, overpower it. But what I just witnessed was different. She paused. This human did not try to win. He tried to endure. Every blow he took for the cub. Every time he fell, he positioned himself as a shield. This is not the Thraxian way. Vex stepped forward. Exactly. He showed weakness, not strength. No, Thera said quietly. He showed a different kind of strength. The strength to suffer for another, to endure pain not because he is strong enough to ignore it, but because protecting the cub mattered more than his own safety. She looked at Vex. Is that not the essence of parental duty? To place the child above oneself? There was no answer. The crowd of Thraxians watching had gone completely silent. Thera turned back to Day. You have passed the second trial. Tomorrow you will face the third and final test. But tonight, rest. You will need your strength. That night, back on the Gyeongbok, Day lay in the medical bay while Sora finished treating his injuries. The cuts were not deep, but there were many of them. His ribs were bruised, his muscles strained. He would be sore for days. Rel refused to leave, sitting in a chair next to his bed. The cub's eyes never left him, as if afraid he might disappear. Occasionally, Rel would reach out and touch his hand just to make sure he was still there. You did well today, Hana said from the doorway. Better than I expected, honestly. I heard everywhere, Day replied with a weak laugh. You earned that pain protecting someone who matters to you, Hana said. She looked at Rel. The question is, what happens after tomorrow? If you pass the third trial, this becomes real. You will be responsible for raising a Thraxian cub. That is not temporary. That is years of commitment. Day looked at Rel, at those golden eyes watching him with complete trust. I know. But when I found this cub alone and scared, I made a choice. I cannot unmake it now just because things got complicated. Rel's small voice spoke up. Day, stay always? He reached out and took the small clawed hand in his. Always, he promised. No matter what happens tomorrow. The third trial was different from the others. There was no combat arena, no hunting ground. Instead, Day was brought to a simple room with 2 doors and a viewing window. Rel was taken through one door by Thera herself. Day watched the cub go, saw the uncertainty in those golden eyes. This is the trial of the bond, Thera explained. It is the simplest and yet the most difficult. Rel will be placed in a room with 2 paths. One leads to you. The other leads to a prestigious Thraxian warrior who has volunteered to adopt the cub. Both of you will call for Rel. The cub must choose. That is not fair, Day said immediately. Rel trusts me. But the other option is someone from Rel's own species. Someone who can teach Rel things I cannot. Someone who belongs in Rel's world. Exactly, Thera replied. This trial tests whether the bond you claim is genuine, or simply the result of trauma and isolation. If Rel truly sees you as family, the choice will be clear. If the bond is weak, the cub will choose the more logical option. Day felt his stomach twist. He had passed the first 2 trials through effort and determination, but this one was entirely out of his control. It depended completely on what Rel felt, on whether the past days had meant as much to the cub as they had to him. He was led to his position. Through the window, he could see into the central room where Rel would be placed. He could also see the other door, where a tall Thraxian warrior stood. The warrior wore decorated armor and carried himself with obvious pride. This was someone important in their society, someone who would give Rel status and proper training. The door opened and Rel was led into the center room by a neutral attendant. The small cub looked around, confused and scared. The attendant released Rel's hand and stepped back. Thera's voice echoed in the room. Little one, you must choose. 2 paths lie before you. 2 potential guardians. Listen to them both, then go to the one you trust to care for you. The Thraxian warrior spoke first. His voice was deep and resonant, speaking in the Thraxian language. Day could not understand the words, but he could hear the power in them, the confidence. The warrior was promising strength, promising a proper Thraxian upbringing. Rel's ears perked up, listening. The cub took a step toward the warrior's door. Day felt panic rising in his chest. He wanted to call out, to remind Rel of everything they had shared. But what could he say? That he was sorry he was not Thraxian? That he was sorry he could not teach Rel to be a proper warrior? Then he realized something. Rel did not need promises of strength or status. Rel needed to know that the person who had held the cub in the dark, who had shared food and safety, was still here. Hey, Rel, Day said softly. It is me, it is Day. Rel's head snapped toward his voice. Those golden eyes found the window where Day stood. I know you are scared, Day continued. I know this is confusing, but I am here. I promised you that I would stay. Remember? The Thraxian warrior spoke again, his voice stronger, more commanding. But Rel was not looking at him anymore. The cub's entire focus was on the window on Day. You are safe, Day said. No matter what you choose, you will be safe. But if you want me, I am right here. I will always be right here. Rel made a sound, a small chirp of recognition. The cub started moving not toward the warrior's door but toward Day's. The small feet moved faster, breaking into a run. Rel hit the door and it opened automatically. Day knelt down and caught the cub as Rel launched into his arms. Small claws gripped his shirt, familiar and desperate. The small body pressed against him, trembling. "Day," Rel said, the word muffled against his shoulder. "Day, stay." "Rel, stay. Always." "Always," Day agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "I promise." When Thera entered the room, she found them like that, human and cub holding each other. She stood quietly for a moment, watching. Then she spoke. "You have passed all 3 trials. By the laws of our people, you are recognized as Rel's guardian." She paused. "This has never happened before. There will be complications." "I know," Day said. He did not let go of Rel. "You will need to remain in Thraxian space for at least 1 year," Thera continued. "This is non-negotiable. Rel must learn our language, our customs, our history. You will be provided instructors. The cub cannot be raised entirely outside our culture." "That is fair," Day agreed. "Rel should know about Thraxian heritage." Thera's expression was difficult to read. "Many of my people will not accept this. Some will see it as an insult to our species that one of our young chose a human. There may be attempts to challenge the ruling." "Then I will face them," Day said simply. News of the trial results spread rapidly through the station and beyond. Within hours, it was being transmitted across Thraxian space. Within a day, it had reached other species' territories. The reactions were immediate and intense. On the Gyeongbok, Captain Hana was bombarded with communication requests. News agencies wanted interviews. Human colonies wanted to celebrate Day as a hero. Other merchant crews wanted advice on dealing with alien juveniles. But there were darker responses, too. The Velcoran hierarchy issued a formal statement condemning the trial results as a corruption of natural species boundaries. Several Thraxian military officials protested publicly, claiming that the trials had been unfairly weighted toward intelligence over strength. Vex himself appeared on station news broadcasts, his face tight with barely controlled anger. "This sets a dangerous precedent. Our cubs are meant to be raised as warriors, not as pets for species who cannot even defend themselves properly. This human may have passed the trials, but that does not mean he is suitable to raise a Thraxian." Minho watched the broadcast with disgust. "He is just angry that a human showed him up." "It is more than that," Sora said thoughtfully. "Think about what this means for their culture. The Thraxians built their entire civilization on the idea that strength equals worthiness. Day proved that emotional bonds can be stronger than physical power. That threatens their whole worldview." Hana nodded slowly. "Which means this is not over. Even with Thera's approval, there will be people trying to reverse the decision." She was right. 3 days after the trials ended, an incident occurred. The Gyeongbok had been cleared to dock at a civilian section of the station, while Day attended his first session with Thraxian cultural instructors. Rel was with him, as the cub refused to be separated for long. They were in a market area when the attack came. It was not an official action, just a group of young Thraxian warriors who disagreed with the trial results. They surrounded Day and Rel in a narrow corridor, blocking the exits. "You do not belong here, human," the leader said. He was young, barely an adult by Thraxian standards, but already twice Day's size. "That cub should be with its own kind." Day stepped back, positioning himself between Rel and the threat. His body was still sore from the trials, but his mind was clear. The Mother Guardian made her ruling. "If you have an issue with it, take it up with her." "We are taking it up with you," another warrior growled. Right now, they moved forward. Day knew he could not fight them all, especially not while protecting Rel. He prepared to do what he had done in the trial, to endure and protect for as long as possible. But then something unexpected happened. Other Thraxians in the market started to intervene. Not warriors, but civilians. Shopkeepers and merchants who had been watching stepped forward. "Enough," an older Thraxian female said firmly. "The human passed the trials fairly. The cub chose him. That is the end of it." "This is not your concern," the young warrior leader said. "It is everyone's concern," another merchant replied. "We watched the trials. We saw how that human fought to protect the cub, how he endured pain for it. That is worthiness by any measure." More Thraxians joined in, forming a barrier between Day and the aggressive warriors. The young fighters looked confused, uncertain how to proceed when faced with opposition from their own people. Finally, they backed down. The leader gave Day one last hostile look before leaving with his group. The market slowly returned to normal, though many eyes remained on Day and Rel. The older female who had spoken first approached. "Do not judge all of us by those younglings. Many of us respect what you have done. It is unusual. But perhaps that is not a bad thing." "Thank you," Day said quietly. She looked down at Rel, still pressed against Day's legs. "Take care of the little one, and be careful. Not everyone will be as accepting as we are." That evening, Thera summoned Day to her office. She looked tired, her scales duller than usual. When she spoke, her voice was weary. "I heard about the incident in the market. This is what I was afraid of. There are factions within our society who see your guardianship as a threat. I passed the trials," Day said. "Fairly, I know. And legally, your claim is solid. But law does not prevent individuals from acting on their beliefs." She paused. "I can provide security, but I cannot protect you every moment. You must be careful." "I understand," Day said. Then he hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Why are you helping me? You could have made the trials impossible. You could have ruled against me. Why did you not?" Thera was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "Because I have overseen kinship bonds for over a century. I have seen thousands of cubs placed with guardians, and in all that time, I have rarely seen a bond as strong as what you and Rel share." She walked to her window, looking out at the station. "My people built a culture around strength and combat, because we believed that was how we survived. But maybe we forgot something along the way. Maybe we forgot that there are different kinds of strength. You think this will change things?" Day asked. "I think it already has," Thera replied. "The fact that you passed those trials, that Rel chose you, it has started a conversation among my people. Some are angry, some are curious, but everyone is talking. And talking leads to thinking. Thinking leads to change." She turned back to him. "What you and Rel have is something we called kinship in ancient times, before we formalized it into trials and warrior codes. True kinship, based not on strength but on care, on sacrifice, on choosing to protect someone weaker than yourself, not because you must but because you want to. That sounds like what humans call family," Day said quietly. "Perhaps," Thera agreed, "and perhaps that is something we need to remember how to have." As Day left the office, Rel walking beside him holding his hand, he thought about Thera's words. He had not set out to change anything. He had just tried to help a scared child. But maybe sometimes that was enough. Maybe sometimes simple kindness was the most revolutionary act of all. 6 months had passed since the trials. Day stood in the observation room of the Thraxian Educational Center, watching Rel practice with other cubs. The young Thraxian moved with more confidence now, no longer the frightened creature he had found in the wreckage. Rel's scales had grown brighter, the stripes more distinct. The cub was healthy and happy. But Rel was also different from the other cubs in ways that made some Thraxians uncomfortable. While the others practiced hunting stances, Rel would sometimes stop to ask questions about why they moved a certain way. While others competed aggressively, Rel would help smaller cubs who struggled. These were not typical Thraxian behaviors. The instructor, an older warrior named Kresh, approached Day. Over the past months, they had developed a careful working relationship. "Your cub learns quickly," Kresh said, "but Rel asks too many questions. In combat, there is no time for thinking. Only action. Thinking before action is how humans survive," Day replied. "Rel is learning from both of us. That is not a bad thing." Kresh made a sound that might have been agreement or frustration. "Perhaps. But the cub will need to choose eventually, Thraxian way or human way. Or maybe Rel can be both," Day suggested. "A Thraxian who also understands human thinking. Would that be so terrible?" Before Kresh could answer, alarms suddenly blared through the facility. The lights shifted to red. Security protocols activated automatically, sealing doors and directing everyone to emergency positions. Day's communicator buzzed. It was Hana, her voice tight with urgency. "Day, we have a situation. Get to the civilian sector. Now, there has been an incident." "What kind of incident?" "The kind that involves Vex and his supporters. They released a combat beast in the market district. People are trapped." Day felt cold. The market district was where that older female merchant worked, the one who had defended him months ago. Where families shopped and children played. Why would they do that? To prove a point, Hana said grimly. Vex is claiming this is what happens when a society goes soft, when they allow humans to raise their young. He wants to demonstrate that only warriors can protect people. Rel had stopped training and was looking up at Day with worried eyes. The cub could sense the tension. Rel, stay with Kresh, Day said. I need to go help. No. Rel grabbed his hand. Day, stay safe, please. Day knelt down, putting himself at eye level with his cub. Remember what I taught you? About helping people who need it? That is what I am doing now. Those people in the market need help. But you get hurt, Rel said, small voice breaking. Like in trials. Maybe, but I will come back. I promise. He stood up, looking at Kresh. Keep Rel safe. The instructor nodded gravely. Go, the cub will be protected. Day ran through the station corridors, following the emergency route markers. He could hear the distant sounds of panic, of people screaming. When he reached the market district, the scene was chaos. The beast Vex had released was massive, even larger than the Raka beast from the hunting trial. It was tearing through market stalls, driven mad by the noise and confusion. People were trapped behind overturned carts and collapsed structures. Thraxian security forces were present, but struggling to contain the creature without causing more damage to the civilians. Day spotted the older merchant female, pinned behind debris with several younglings. She was trying to shield them with her body, but the beast was moving in their direction. He did not think. He just moved. Grabbing a piece of metal pipe from the wreckage, he ran toward the beast, making as much noise as possible. The creature's head swiveled toward him, attracted by the movement and sound. Over here, Day shouted. Come on. The beast charged. Day ran, leading it away from the trapped civilians. He remembered the hunting trial, remembered how he had used the environment. He spotted a narrow passage between two buildings and darted into it. The beast followed, its bulk barely fitting. Day ran deeper into the passage, then suddenly dropped and rolled to the side. The creature could not stop its momentum. It crashed into the dead end, stunning itself temporarily. Security forces arrived seconds later, finally able to contain the beast now that it was confined and dazed. As they worked to secure it, Day leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His heart was pounding, but he was unhurt. Thera appeared, flanked by armed guards. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. Vex has been arrested. This was his plan, to demonstrate that civilians are helpless without warrior protection. Instead, he has proven only that he is willing to endanger innocent lives for his pride. She looked at Day. And you proved once again that courage does not require claws. You saved lives today. I just did what anyone should do, Day replied. That is exactly my point, Thera said quietly. But not everyone does. You did. Later that day, Thera called an emergency meeting of the Council of Matriarchs. Day was not present, but Hana managed to get a recording of what happened. That evening, she played it for the crew. On the screen, Thera stood before the assembled council leaders. Behind her, footage played showing the incident in the market. It showed Day leading the beast away from civilians. It showed him using strategy instead of strength, intelligence instead of violence. But what made everyone in the crew go silent was what happened next. Thera showed another piece of footage, one that had been captured by security cameras but not yet released publicly. It showed Rel, back at the educational center. The cub had broken away from Kresh despite being told to stay. Rel had run through the station, following the emergency route toward the market. Security had stopped the young cub before reaching the danger zone, but the intent was clear. Rel, barely capable of defending itself, had been trying to reach Day, to help, to protect. Thera paused the footage on Rel's face, on those golden eyes filled with determination and fear. Look at this cub, she said to the council. Look at what it has learned in 6 months with a human guardian. Not just hunting skills or combat stances. Rel has learned something we have spent centuries trying to breed out of our species. Rel has learned that protecting others is more important than personal safety. That loyalty means standing by those you care about even when afraid. She let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. We pride ourselves on strength, on being apex predators, on raising warriors. But when I watch this cub trying to reach its guardian, when I watch this human risk himself for strangers, I am forced to ask a question. What is strength, really? Is it the ability to kill? Or is it the courage to protect? Is it dominance over others? Or is it the choice to endure suffering for those who cannot defend themselves? She turned to face the council directly. I have studied our ancient texts. Before we became an empire, before we formalized the warrior codes, we were different. We raised our young in groups. Multiple adults, not always related by blood, would care for cubs together. We bonded not through combat, but through shared protection of the vulnerable. She gestured at the frozen image of Rel. This human has not corrupted our cub. He has reminded us of what we used to be, before we decided that only the strong deserve to live. And this cub raised by a human shows more loyalty and courage than many of our trained warriors. Thera took a breath. I propose that we formally recognize cross-species kinship bonds, not as exceptions or oddities, but as legitimate family structures. And I propose that we begin teaching our young that strength comes in many forms, that protecting the weak is not shameful but the highest calling. The recording showed the council erupting in debate, but when the vote was called, the result was clear. By a narrow margin, the proposals passed. When Hana stopped the playback, the crew sat in stunned silence. Do you understand what this means? Sora said quietly. They just changed thousands of years of cultural practice because of you and Rel. Day felt overwhelmed. I did not mean to change anything. I just wanted to keep Rel safe. And that is exactly why it worked, Minho said. For once, his gruff voice carried respect. You were not trying to prove anything or make a point. You just cared about a kid who needed help. Sometimes that is more powerful than any weapon. The door to the mess hall opened. Rel ran in, having been returned to the ship by security escorts. The cub made a beeline for Day, launching into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him over. Day okay? D safe? Rel's voice was frantic, small hands checking him for injuries. I am fine, Day assured the cub. See? Not hurt. Rel tried to help, the cub said, sounding guilty. But guard stopped. Should have been stronger. Should have been faster. Day held Rel close. No, you did exactly right. Being brave is not about being the strongest or fastest. It is about wanting to help even when you are scared. You were very brave today. Rel was quiet for a moment, then spoke in a small voice. Like Day? Day was brave? We were both brave, Day said. Together. 1 week later, Thera summoned Day to her office one final time. She looked different, somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. The council has made their decision official, she said. Your guardianship of Rel is recognized not just as a legal exception, but as a legitimate family bond. You have completed the required year in our territory. If you wish to leave, you may do so. Rel will be welcome in Thraxian space always, but the cub is yours to raise. Thank you, Day said. Thera stood and walked to her window, looking out at the stars beyond the station. No, thank you. You have given us something we did not know we needed. A reminder that strength without compassion is just violence. That family is built through choice and care, not just blood. She turned back to him. There are already 3 more cases of humans forming bonds with alien juveniles. The phenomenon you started is spreading. Scientists are calling it pack bonding, this human ability to form familial attachments across species lines. Is that a problem? Day asked. That depends on perspective, Thera replied with something that might have been a smile. Some species see it as a weakness, this capacity for empathy. But I think it might be humanity's greatest strength, the ability to see someone in need and simply help, without calculating benefit or risk. She walked to her desk and picked up a small object. It was a medallion, engraved with symbols in the Thraxian language. This is a title, she explained. In ancient Thraxian, it translates as guardian who defies nature. It is meant as a compliment, an acknowledgement that what you have done should have been impossible, yet you did it anyway. Day took the medallion, feeling the weight of it. I did not defy nature. I just helped a frightened child. And that, Thera said softly, is precisely what makes you so dangerous to our old way of thinking. You do not even realize how extraordinary your compassion is. 3 days later, the Gyeongbok prepared to depart Station Karash. The ship had been given a formal contract as a cultural liaison vessel, traveling between human and Thraxian space. It was good work, honorable work, and it would keep them in both territories. Rel sat at a specially built station on the bridge, right next to Day's engineering console. The cub had grown considerably in the past year, nearly 4 feet tall now, but the bond remained as strong as ever. As the ship pulled away from the station, Rel pressed against the viewport, watching the massive structure grow smaller. Will we come back? The cub asked. Of course, Day replied. This is part of your heritage. You should know where you came from. But home is with you. Rel said simply. Wherever you go, that is home. Day felt his throat tighten. He reached over and scratched behind Rel's ears, that familiar gesture of affection. Yes, we are home together. As they jumped to hyperspace, Rel asked about how the hyperdrive worked. Day began explaining the principles of quantum mechanics, his voice patient and gentle. Rel listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed genuine understanding. Behind them, Station Karash disappeared into the distance. But what had happened there continued to ripple outward across the galaxy. Conversations were starting. Questions were being asked. Old assumptions were being challenged. And somewhere in Thera's office, the mother guardian of the Thraxian Empire sat at her desk, reviewing reports of other cross-species bonds forming across known space. She thought about ancient texts and forgotten histories. She thought about the human who had proven that family was not about biology or strength, but about choosing to care for someone who needed protection. She looked at the security footage one more time, paused on that moment when Rel had clung to Day in the trial room, the moment that had changed everything, and she whispered the words that would become the title of a new chapter in Thraxian history. If that is not Bloodline, what is?